All right, welcome today to the August National Heritage Best Practices Zoom meeting. I'm very excited today to welcome our presenters from National Aviation Heritage Area, Baltimore National Heritage Area, and Blue Ridge National Heritage Area. And they are going to be talking about grant programs in National Heritage Areas. So joining us today is Executive Director Mackensie Wittmer from National Aviation. You can wave, there you go, Mackensie. We have Deputy Director and Grants Portfolio Manager, Danielle Walter-Davis, and from Blue Ridge National Heritage Area, we have Executive Director Angie Chandler. I'd like to thank them all for joining us today to share about their grant programs. And we're going to start with National Aviation, then move to Baltimore, and then Blue Ridge. And if you're unfamiliar with their program, basically they're each going to talk about their program. And at the very end, we will open it up for questions. So without any further ado, Mackensie, we will start with you. If you would like to pull up your slides, we will get started.
Sure, I'll pull up my slides in just a second, but hello again, everyone. My name is Mackensie Wittmer. I am the Executive Director of the National Aviation Heritage Area. That heritage area is in Southwest Ohio, and the headquarters are in the city of Dayton. As you can tell from my name and my square, the National Aviation Heritage Area creates the acronym NAHA. So when you hear me say NAHA today, I am not laughing at myself or you. I am just talking about the National Aviation Heritage Area. So I had two goals today in the 10 minutes they asked me to present. One was to share the context in which the National Aviation Heritage Area made the decision to organize and start a subgrant program. And then second, what our subgrant program looks like. There might be two unique aspects of our subgrant program that will differ from the ones that you're going to hear from Baltimore and Blue Ridge. One is that it is a non-competitive grant system, and the other is that all subgrants are must adhere to the general accepted accounting practices, and they appear on our financials. So I'll get into that in just a second. But first, I wanted to share with you the context in which NAHA decided to start a subgrant program. In 2018, my supervisor called the staff together to share two problems. One is we were not spending enough of our Heritage Partnership Program money, and we were approaching our 15-year agreement closeout, our cooperative agreement with the national park. That was going to close in December of 2019. And we weren't spending at the pace we needed to be spending to close out that cooperative agreement. The second is that we weren't generating enough non-federal match anymore. We had had a large project and it had stalled. So those sound like two big problems, but they actually created an amazing opportunity because for a number of years, I had wanted to start a subgrant program. I had seen many of our heritage area partners execute subgrant programs, and I felt like it was would be a beneficial program to the heritage area. So I'm going to start with two suggestions because they helped me tremendously. Is one, you don't have to start from scratch. If you are looking to assess your current subgrant program or implement a new one, visit your partner heritage area websites. They have everything from their timelines and forms and priorities on their websites. You do not have to start from scratch. We are here to help you. And the second is I would recommend, this was recommended to me, I would recommend taking at least a few courses in federal grants management. There is a third-party vendor called Management Concepts, and they have a federal grants management certificate for pass-through entities. So if you're going to use your federal dollars to subgrant, this will help you tremendously. I'm dropping the link in the chat right now. And what you want to do is scroll down about halfway and look at the coursework for pass-through entities. This has not only helped me make sure our subgrant program is federally compliant, but it's also made me better at working with the National Park Service for our own cooperative agreement and other grant management situations like Save America's Treasures and such. So I did drop that link into the chat. So that was the context of what we were facing in 2018, and 2 tips for how to get started. I will share my screen. I will acknowledge that I did not make a new PowerPoint presentation. I'm reusing one that I gave to the NAHA Board of Directors in 2021 to tell them about our subgrant program. I was notifying them of some small changes. So again, what makes the NAHA current subgrant program unique is it's not competitive. We work with 17 designated partners across an 8-county region. 15 of those 17 can receive federal funds. The other 2 are federal agencies. So we knew that by budgeting $75,000, we could make available to each of the 15 designated partners a non-competitive grant opportunity. So we budgeted, like I said, $75,000, and I am sharing through this presentation how I was talking with our board about the project. So I was, of course, reminding them of what it was, that it was non-competitive. We do have a board of 40 people, so everyone feel sorry for me right now and send me good vibes, because I do have a board of 40 individuals, including these designated partners. So I was sharing with them how we were allowed to do a subgrant program. It was identified in our founding legislation, part of our general management plan, but hadn't been implemented. It was a tangible way to support heritage area partners. It's a standard practice across heritage areas. We had this stalled project, so we needed to address that we were not spending money or making match at the rate we had projected. And of course, when we fill out our paperwork and send them to Liz, these are the types of projects that we are reporting to the national park. And it is a way to generate that one-to-one non-federal match.
Able to update my computer, and I can do the cut and paste.
So I will share next that I wanted to give you kind of what our program looked like, and it still very much looks like this today. So what happens is our board of trustees approves our budget. We do a federal fiscal year, so we're normally approving that budget in August or November. Then we were waiting to hear from the National Park Service our actual appropriation for that year. So once we received that final number from our regional coordinator, for us in the Midwest region, that's Chris Stein, we would issue our notice of funding opportunity. That notice of funding opportunity would go out publicly, because while we work with 17 designated partners, 15 that can receive funding, a friends group can also apply, someone who is supporting aviation heritage in our region. That notice of funding opportunity would have the grant instructions with deadlines, and it would also include a link to our Google application. The National Aviation Heritage Area, or NAHA, we are using Google Forms for our grants management, but understand that our number of grants is much smaller than what you're going to hear in the next 2 programs. So in addition, we use Google Forms, and they'd have a budget worksheet. After our NOFO, our notice of funding opportunity, we would also issue a 30-day notice before the deadline, and then a 1-week notice. If a partner would contact me and say, I have a project, I encourage them all to contact me before application so we can discuss. If they were waiting on something like a quote, or maybe they need to go before their board, I would let them preliminarily apply before the deadline, and I would hold that application because they've contacted me, I knew it was coming. So then the deadline comes, and I review the applications. Because it's not competitive, all they have to do is be federally compliant. I can review them without a board committee review or review panel, and I can ensure federal compliancy. And then the next step for me would be to issue the notice of award and grant agreement. That is a 1-page document that outlines the project, the roles and responsibilities of each organization, the timelines, And both parties are, and of course the legalese about what we can spend federal money on and allowable costs, and both parties are required to sign it. Upon the signing of that notice of award, their performance period starts. We do not do pre-award costs, and any cost that they occur before award is not covered by this grant. And then they have that performance period to September 30 of the year. We do that because we run just a 1-year cycle. Then they have 60 days to close out, which allows me time to do our cooperative agreement closeout or our annual closeout, forgive me. And then each year we do a participant survey to assess and improve and refine the process. The last slide I'm going to share with you is actually this slide, which I use with our grant applicants. Our board decided that all of our grants would be GAP compliant. Your sub-grant program does not have to do this. This is something that was a decision by the organization that I work for. So there are 3 ways that our partners can make match that is compliant to the general accepted accounting practices or procedures, whatever GAP stands for. So there are 3 ways that our partners make this approved match. One is new donor money. And here is an example. Donors give directly to NAHA and restrict their donation for a designated project. So 5 donors give me $1,000 and I match that with $5,000 and we write a check to the organization for $10,000. The key for this one is that when new donor money comes into your organization and you are issuing it with a subgrant, that donor money is considered federal dollars. So they must apply the entire $10,000 to that project, and they must treat that entire amount as federal money. The second way to make GAP approved non-federal match is using their capital reserves. So if an organization wants to use their own money, they can send that money to NAHA and I can pay a vendor directly. So here's an example. I have a museum that's doing a landscaping project, and that landscaping project is $20,000. They would be required to send NAHA $15,000. I would match their $15,000 with that $5,000 match, that $5,000 grant. That is my threshold. And then we would pay the landscaper. We would pay the invoice to the landscaper for $20,000. And then the last way that you can make non-federal match is with in-kind services and volunteer hours. So hours associated with the project, not with normal staff time and definitely not with board membership, can be reported on a subgrant. If you have a skilled tradesperson, you can use the federal hourly rate for that skill. So I have a partner who is building a new airplane and they need $5,000 for materials and supplies to test their airplane. So we issue the money upon award to that partner. We do advance them that money, and they use that money to buy their materials and supplies. They track over the course of the performance period the volunteer hours of pilots, mechanics, and engineers who are testing that airplane. And then they close out with a high rate of volunteer hours. So that's the 3 ways we allow partners to make GAP approved non-federal match. Again, that is not a requirement of the National Park Service. That is something that is unique to my subgrant program. I do believe that I am out of time, and so I will stop there and let Baltimore take it from here.
Thanks, Mackensie. That was really informative, and I love learning about different grant programs. So this is such a treat. Hello, everybody. Again, I'm Danielle Walter Davis. I am the Deputy Director and Grants Portfolio Manager at Baltimore National Heritage Area. And as Mackensie said with acronyms, if you hear me say BNHA, that's Baltimore National Heritage Area. So I just wanted to clarify that with everybody. Before I share my screen, I was thinking about the audience today, and I know that we have some folks on here who have very mature grant programs. They have a staff member who is a very experienced grants administrator, and we also have newer heritage areas that are thinking about starting subgrantee programs. So I made the decision to really focus my presentation on perhaps helping people that are thinking about starting their subgrantee programs. And of course, I can always expand on any slide or questions you have. So let me get started. Can you see my screen? Yes. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so slideshow. Okay, great. So the Baltimore National Heritage Area is obviously in Baltimore, and we're at 1524 Holland Street. I wanted to do a quick overview of things I'll be covering. I'm going to give you the background and context of our different grant programs. Different than Mackensie, all of our grant programs are competitive, and we use a grant review committee, which I'll talk about in later slides. And I'm going to focus very briefly and quickly on organizing principles, the definition for heritage tourism, the link to your CMP, and the mission statement. And it may be a bit oversimplified, but very critical to have that aligned across your board, your review committee, staff, and applicant. I'll do a snapshot of our programs, and then I'll focus more on one of our 4 grant programs, which is called the Heritage Investment Grant Fund. This is our subgrantee program through National Park Service, federal funds. And then I'll talk quickly about some challenges and some of our biggest wins. If you're not familiar with Maryland, we do have a Maryland State Heritage Areas system. We actually have 13 heritage areas, and they're under the umbrella of the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. We work together, but we also have our separate regional identities that we highlight. And if you can see right here, Baltimore Heritage Area, National Heritage Area is the smallest of all the heritage areas, but we probably have the highest concentration of cultural and heritage institutions per square mile. So we have a very different dynamic and offerings in heritage tourism. This is a snapshot of all our different grant programs. We have a small capital grant fund, which is city funds. We have a neighborhood placemaking grant program, which is grassroots, smaller mini grants, non-capital, and that's state funds. We have a much larger program that we do not run in-house, but we provide technical assistance to our partners, infusing state dollars into the heritage area, and that's through the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority. And then we have the Heritage Investment Grant Fund, which is our NPS pass-through subgrantee program. All of these, as I said before, all of these programs are competitive. They are all 2-year performance dates, and they all require a match, which I will get into later. The only program that is a 1-year program is the neighborhood placemaking grants, because there are many grants in communities and in neighborhoods. And if I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with Baltimore, but we are called the City of Neighborhoods. We have over 122 neighborhoods with all different stories, historic buildings, and they each have a different unique story to tell. This is our grant programs by the numbers. We started our grant program, the Small Capital Grant Program, through the city in 2009. And we added our newest grant program, the Neighborhood Placemaking Grant Program, which is state funds, just in 2019. And I thought to share this because no matter how small your grants may be, Over time, there is significant investment dollars and technical assistance into the heritage areas. So over the course of all these years, we're proud to say that we've invested over 2.7 million in direct grants to partners. And through the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, much more than that. You'll see there's a line because it's important to know the top 3 grant programs are all managed in-house. And the 4th one, the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, is managed at the state level. But we are truly formal partners, and we are their technical assistance arm in our heritage area. So we take that role very seriously because we help to infuse state dollars to our partners when we provide technical assistance. I want to emphasize the Heritage Investment Grant Program is our federal grant program, sub-grantee program. We started out with this program giving $100,000 away annually for 2-year award programs. And now we are up to $250,000. We find that a sub-grantee program is one of the most effective ways to assist our partners to develop collaborative programs and to really assist in moving the heritage tourism needle within our heritage area. So this increase happened gradually over the last 3 years. So our applicants are up to about 20 applicants a year, awardees, and over a 2-year period, we would give another $250,000 away. This also comes with a match. So very quickly, I wanted to just delve into, if you're thinking about a sub-grantee program, in addition to all of Mackensie's amazing advice as well, this seems very basic, but it's very important. Make sure that you have your definition of heritage tourism clear between the board of directors, staff, grants review committee, and the applicant. A reason I bring this up is we had a grant review committee meeting in about 2019, and some of the reviewers had picked different definitions of heritage tourism. Within our industry, we all understand heritage tourism, but the majority of people don't. So coming up with a very clear definition is critical when you're starting, because everything's going to align around that, your parameters and your content and what projects you'll fund. Also, clear links to your comprehensive management plan is key. Our management plan is very large, so we set our priorities every year, every 5 years, and what areas we're going to focus on. And then we make sure there's a link to the grant program, and that link is also in the applications. And then mission statement, also very clear. The way we look at our partners and our grantees is just that, partners. We're a very small staff, and so the only way we can move our mission is our partners. They're our legs on the ground, and it's always good to reevaluate, are we hitting our mission by these grants? And if there's not alignment, then you can't make the connection between MPS, the heritage area, and the sub-grantee.
I'm all right.
Really quickly, I'm just going to say that we adopted this definition. It's the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the Maryland Historical Trust. This brings a nice line between federal, state, and our organization, the local heritage area. Our mission: promote, preserve, and enhance Baltimore's cultural and historic legacy and natural resources for current and future generations. We do a lot of youth programs, so this mission statement is very important. And when we talk to our partners, we say, does your project move our mission forward? This is very broad categories in our comprehensive management plan. We have interpretive themes on the left and our management actions on the right. The reason I bring this up is we came up with a challenge with some of our applicants. No one was hitting the question, how are you going to advance heritage tourism? How is this project going to do that? Every applicant was scoring very low. So we went back to our CMP and realized We have a heritage tourism development component in our CMP, but it wasn't on the applications. So what we did was we took very specific questions and made sure they were infused in the application, were clear in the scorecard, and our grant review committee was also aware that this is how we define heritage tourism, and the applicant had the chance to answer appropriately. So it's an example of how to link your CMP with your application and with your scorecard. So this is the $1 million question. Are you eligible? When you are thinking about putting your sub-grantee program, you need to ask yourself this question. You have to have organizational eligibility and eligible activities. And I put parent funder led first because the first place you're going to look is you're going to go back to your task agreement, your cooperative agreement, and see what parameters your parent funder has. And that's a good place to start. For federal grants, you should familiarize yourself with the 2 CFR 200 uniform guidance. This is free online, or you can pay, I think, $60 or $50 and get a hard copy book. But it's important to understand what the requirements are for pass-through entities. It's also important to know this is guidance. This is federal guidance. So some things are a must and other things are a may, where you have some flexibility. And then you're going to want to go to National Park Service and check with your program officer in your task agreement to see what the parameters are at MPS. Do they have additional requirements? And you need to do your homework up front before you even start to write your guidelines on your grant program. This is an example of PNHA's organizational eligibility, and it's a bit of a blend. We have different funders and different requirements, but there are some things the same. So one of the technical assistance outreach that you will want to do if you're going to be doing a federal sub-grantee program is that all your organizations, all your partners, they must have a unique identifier number, UIN, and this is as of April 2023. This is something that your partners do. They need to go to sam.gov and register. And a way to tag that is this number should be on every form that you have with your sub-grantee, so that the federal government, National Park Service can link the sub-grantee to a pot of money back to the mission and the program. This is very important for compliance and is required now. So we have also said it's only nonprofit organizations or Baltimore City departments that are eligible, no individuals, no for-profit businesses. A lot of times, if you go that route, it's a different set of criteria and compliance. For us, we also require good standing with the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation. This is required by the state, but we require it for all of our grantees. As you all know, you have to be located within the boundary, or the activity for us in Baltimore needs to occur within the heritage area. Additionally, if you're working with your local city, county, even the Maryland Department of, say, Natural Resources, if you have a project on their land or uses resources, they often require a form or some level of approval. So that is something else we require. So doing your homework ahead of time on what are your requirements, what are things you're going to add on, and meshing sort of the federal, city, state together will really streamline your process and make sure you're in compliance. Just a quick question. Does anybody recognize these categories? These are eligible project activities for our Heritage Investment Fund. Feel free to just unmute. Liz, if Liz is on the call, she may recognize these.
Well, we all see them on the WASO report every year. So these are the categories we have to report to the Park Service. Pretty smart,
Right. Right.
Smart.
So what we were finding when we did our National Park Service data report is a lot of these categories were sort of missing in our grants guidelines of eligible project activities. We were doing all of these, they just weren't categorized this way. So we really tried to align what the National Park Service wanted from us in terms of our data and what we were doing in our sub-grantee program. And this was a wonderful opportunity to also expand our project activities. We now have capacity building support. We now have collections, care, and conservation, which we didn't have before. Specifically land, water, environmental conservation. We don't do as much in this area, but it's an eligible activity. So we've only put this in place in the last 3 years, but it really helps align our sub-grantee program, gives us focus parameters with all of our partners, and it links back to our mission and then links back to National Park Service priorities. So I would highly recommend this, and our grantees have said they have really appreciated the expanded project activities. One thing I thought was very important to note in this slide, for the exception of capacity building, operating support, and marketing grants, all proposed projects must have a public-facing component or plan. It could be in person or virtual. This is very important to us in Baltimore because we have, for example, there is the Lithuanian Hall has a fantastic collections library, and it desperately needs support, and they need to digitize it. And we've asked them to come in for a grant, which they haven't done. But what we find is some of our grantees in the past have done fantastic jobs on all of their projects, but then the public doesn't see them. So we joke around and say, you know the saying, build it and they will come. We do not believe that in Baltimore. We say, build it, and then what's your visitor engagement plan? Build it, conserve it, and then how are you getting people there? That is always hand in hand with all of our non-capital projects, especially. Grants Review Committee. So some heritage areas use their board of directors. We have a separate grants review committee. These are your decision makers. And it's very important to take care of this group, educate this group so that they can be the best review team you have. We have approximately 10 reviewers. 30% are representing City of Baltimore. We have 1 board member, which is great because the board member is the link to our board of directors. And then we have remaining expertise in heritage tourism, education, youth development, historic preservation, arts, and natural resources. Plus, we have a former grantee. The former grantee is only a 1-year commitment. And this is fantastic, not only in building capacity with your grantees to see what it's like to be on a grants review committee and see the decision-making process, but it also is sort of a ground up perspective this person brings from the community as a former grantee. And that has been very successful. New this year is we are setting 3-year term limits. Before we had no term limits, and our grants review committee loves us and they did not want to leave, but it's important to stagger your tenure, have new perspectives coming in. 1 year for all of them is too short because a lot of our projects come in multiple years. So we found that 3 years is the magic number. Stipend, this is optional because a lot of government employees cannot accept a stipend, but it is slowly, at least in our region, becoming a best practice. The Maryland state organizations that have review committees all have a modest stipend as a show of appreciation for their time and energy. And we are just launching this year a tour, familiarization tour and completed projects tour for our grants review committee. We felt, especially coming out of COVID, seeing the applications only being on Zoom, there was reviewer fatigue and not really seeing the projects that were either funded or being familiar with some of the neighborhoods. And we launched that this year, and we'll continue to do that once a year. This keeps your review team fresh. It also educates them, and at the end just makes them stronger reviewers for you in your heritage area. I'm going to go quickly. Selection criteria. We have a very basic criteria that's more about project management. I'll just let you read the slide. Heritage tourism value is our heaviest weighted category. And in our actual application, we have questions very specific to the applicant so that it takes the guesswork out of what do we mean by heritage tourism. This has been very successful in terms of saying to the applicant, just answer the questions at a bare minimum, and then you can add more in. So it takes the guesswork out for the applicant and gets the content we need to the reviewers. Budget is one area I spend a lot of time on. I will let you just quickly review these blocks. This is the different areas that most of our grantees need help on or guidance on. I strongly suggest using a budget template for all your grant programs. We have a match that details that in the template to make it easier for the applicant. Volunteer time. We typically go by the independent sectors rate. Maryland rate is a little bit higher.
Hey, Danielle.
Yes?
I hate to interrupt. It's very interesting, but Angie still needs to go and we are rapidly running out of time.
I am so sorry. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do quick challenges you encountered, wins, and I'll just show one screenshot. Kenyona, can you put in the chat the links to our grant investment map, please?
And you know what, Danielle, we can also send out the PowerPoint because it's very thorough as a follow-up to the meeting as well.
Great. So real quickly, the challenges are really there. One thing I'll highlight, do I have 2 minutes? Is that fair?
Can I give
1
you
minute.
one? Like we're already at 20 till.
Okay.
We're not
Oh
gonna
my
have
gosh.
any time
Okay.
for
I am so
questions at
sorry.
this point.
So I will leave this here. One thing I will share with you is one of our biggest wins, and I think this was very helpful, is we put together a grant equity investment map. This is an ArcGIS. I highly suggest it. We work with a consultant that maps all of our grants, and it's public facing. So anybody can go to our website and check it out. You can see all of our grantees in the last 5 years by grant category. And also it's great for reviewers. So we track new applicants and former grant awards for every application that comes in. It's highly recommend to everybody. I apologize. We can talk about grants forever.
No, and it's very thorough and very informative, but I do want to make sure we get through Angie and then have a few minutes for Q&A.
Nope.
So
Thank you for your time. I apologize.
Angie? Oh, you're muted, Angie. And Danielle, can you take down your PowerPoint? There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get back to my screen and share. And okay. And slideshow. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll just make this as brief as I can. Just very quickly, who we are. Of course, just like everyone else, we're congressionally designated. Our case for designation rested on the national significance of 5 heritage assets of Western North Carolina: natural, Cherokee, craft, music, and agriculture heritage. We serve a 25 county area, which is about the size of Maryland. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we match our funds, of course, with other funds that are not federal. So our mission is to protect, preserve, interpret, and develop the natural, historical, cultural resources of Western North Carolina to benefit present and future generations. And by doing so, we sustain our heritage and improve the economy in our we're a very rural area. The main reason for our grants program, we've been our grants program is one of our oldest programs, started in 2004. We have awarded 188 grants, about a 2.5 million in our own investment with another 5.5 in match. So the grants program is a great way to build partners in the community. Like everyone else, we're a very small staff and we have a big area that we cover. And so connecting with partners and leveraging these funds helps us to leverage the federal funds, but it also provides boots on the ground support to our rural partners. Our grants program is competitive. Usually it's about $180,000. We do a cycle every other year. And usually the number of projects we fund is anywhere from 20 to 30. Some awards are partial. And we usually get about anywhere from 50 to 75 applicants. Our applicants must be units of state and local government, Indian tribes, academic institutions, and nonprofits, and they have to be located within our 25 county footprint. They have to have an equal match and fit into our grant categories. And they also have to constitute a new activity or an expansion of an existing program. We do not fund ongoing programming. So our core interpretive themes, like I mentioned, agriculture, Cherokee, craft, which includes traditional and contemporary craft, handmade objects. We do not fund things in visual arts, performing arts, or literary arts, our music heritage and natural heritage. These are the things we don't provide grant funding for, probably, and this all fits within the federal guidelines, I would imagine as well. So we have a lot of categories, and then within this, we have a few subcategories. I can send the full PowerPoint that will list all of those subcategories and give you good examples of what's involved in all of these. But historic building renovation, open space planning, a lot of that used for agriculture or saving natural resources, ecosystem restoration, also mostly agricultural, natural, interpretive exhibits, programs, products, marketing materials, but no advertising, training programs, music venue improvements and craft venue improvements. One of the most important things I've done with our grants program in the most recent years is that we've actually helped small organization build or renovate a space, a room, an auditorium, a school where they could actually turn those into music venues and craft venues that provided income out in their community and also served as income for musicians and craft artists. Our grants incorporate all the federal regulations, 12 months to complete a project. Sometimes folks will ask for extensions. We give a 3-month extension from staff. Anything longer than 3 months has to go before the board. The date the contract is signed is the start, and then the board has to approve it. Then we have an evaluation in the end, and they have to acknowledge our support, and they have to write letters to their state legislators and congressional delegation to let them know that they received a grant from us. So our selection criteria is somewhat broad. Mainly, how do these grants benefit the public? And then how do they connect back to our heritage assets? And how are you furthering those along? There's a geographic scope. Are you leveraging partnerships? What's the quality of your implementation and evaluation plans? If you're working with a specific ethnic group or area, who from that specific area are you engaging to help you with your grant? We have a lot of grants that come in that want to do Cherokee related programming or exhibits, etc., but they're required to work with someone in the tribe to help advise them to ensure that it is meeting the criteria that we set. That's the consultation with folklorists, historians, and other people and experts in the field. Sustainability of the project, using local contractors, and environmental responsible use of your resources. We're always looking for projects that are multi-county because we want people working together. That's what this whole program is all about. It's building public-private partnerships, and we want folks reaching across communities, towns, and counties to gather and create projects that are going to be workable. active partnerships, and then leveraging substantial matches. And they have to be focused on those core interpretive themes. Usually our process is a year. Applications are due in the fall. There's a review by staff. We do have a grants committee. The grants committee represents all of the different heritage assets that are within our management plan and our mission. Then a final approval by the board. Some grant applications before final approval have to go to State Historic Preservation Office, and some have to go to the National Park Service for approval, especially if they're NEPA related, any kind of project that would need a NEPA, I guess, program of some sort. The applicants are then notified in the spring. If you go to blueridgeheritage.com partners grants, you'll see our grant guidelines, application form, our project budget form, list of past awards, and reporting forms. And if there's anything else I can provide, I'm happy to talk with anyone about how our program works. I will say that we're in the process of retooling our program. We are in between grants managers right now and trying to find the right fit. And so it's been great to hear all these other ideas today. I've taken a lot of notes. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. And Angie, can you take the PowerPoint down?
I will.
Thank you. All right. So I know there's a couple questions in the chat, and I think that the other presenters have been answering them as we've gone along. But if you have a question, if you'd like to raise your hand, you can ask questions of any or all three of the presenters. I know some of you are just starting on a grant programs. Some have grant programs and are maybe restructuring them. So there's a wide mix of people on the call today. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got a question for everybody. I'm Ben with Appalachian Forest NHA. We're relatively new. We just started our first subgrant program this year. We're reviewing applications right now. We did 20,000 of our Heritage Partnership money. And I wanted to ask everybody about how they deal with restrictions or eligibility for construction. We had lots of potential applicants looking for funding for construction projects. We set a limit on $5,000. So I wanted to hear everybody's thoughts on how you deal with that sort of stuff.
Mackensie, you have your hand up, so I'm guessing
Yeah.
you answer first.
I just was saying that I could take that one. Ben, I think what you did was super smart to stay below that $5,000 threshold, particularly in relation to capital projects. That safeguards you and your organization to a great extent. In general, National Aviation Heritage Area does not take on construction projects because for many of our partners, it would trigger a Section 106 compliance because of historic preservation. So it's something that at this point, we have discouraged partners from doing. Danielle and Angie, how would you share?
We really don't do construction projects either. I mean, what we do for, I would say, to help a space become a music venue when it may have been a gym or an auditorium, something like that. We keep it a very small threshold and do things like lighting, chairs, stage, those types of things that aren't going to be heavy duty construction. It's just too much work and too much trouble for everybody to go there.
I'll just quickly add, I agree with Mackensie and Angie. Our federal sub-grantee program is only non-capital. We don't do capital with our federal funds. Our small capital grant fund is city money. And we just find that source, it's still complicated with new construction and historic preservation as well. But we keep it just with the city, our capital projects.
I did think of one other component, Ben, that might help you out. Is the heritage area can have a federally compliant project for design and construction drawing. So you
Mhm,
can hunk
right.
and chunk that project as long as you are not funding the actual construction.
I will echo that. We do a lot of planning grants in that way. So those are good.
Okay, Brian, you have your hand raised.
Sure, if I could add into that, though I'm going in a completely opposite direction, and listen to your old Uncle Brian here, that you, even though we Motor Cities has done that sort of work, many of our projects, we open up that can of worms for sure with SHPO compliance and that sort of stuff, but it has been some of the most effective work that we've done, the preservation of our automotive heritage sites. So we dare to venture into that, but I agree that planning is helpful and that real hardcore aligning. For instance, we don't fund new construction. So if someone says we want to build a museum for Cadillacs, we don't support that. But if someone says we need foundation work on our existing 100-year-old factory, then we're willing to go into that. So maybe being selective about that. So we don't do any new construction, new acquisition, that sort of thing. We'll say when you build it, we can help you outfit it, we can help you with exhibits, but we can't help you build a new place.
That's exactly right. Just from our perspective, the amount that we offer, our highest awards are $16,000, and you're not going to get much construction done with that. So really, we try to focus our funds on things where it's really, really going to make a difference. And like you said, Brian, once the planning is a good thing to spend the money on, and then once the shell is built and you've got to fill it with exhibits and all kinds of things that really tell the story, all the interpretation.
Angie, can I ask you a question? I noticed in your slides, you mentioned that you do not fund, speaking of interpretation, sort of creative art. Well, you mentioned some creative arts and things that you kind of shy away from, essentially, that you don't fund. I forget what the example was, but can you talk about like the reason why? Because I think we have a similar maybe logic, I think, if that's the logic that you applied. So why is it that some of those
because our management plan and our reason for our heritage area really focused on craft, which is the making of the three-dimensional craft object that can either be a traditional craft object or contemporary, but that does not translate into fine art.
We found ourselves in positions sometimes where everybody didn't agree with the interpretation. So the question was sort of what's best for the greater good. So someone comes to us and says, we want to do a book about Henry Ford's dalliances with, many concubines. It's like, whoa, that could get you into a whole different, it may be very factual, but at the same time, or people the wrong way. So it all depends on which direction.
We tried the book thing a couple of times and we took it out. Because sometimes books, you have little control over the content, and sometimes a good idea never gets done. And
as I say, I don't see Rachel on here from Alaska, but they had a pretty active book program. Brian, I would like you to fund that grant and send me a copy of that book, please.
Well, we've been there and gone down a path that there were pros and cons to it, I think. On the one hand, we're not the arbiters of the history. We are the sort of supporters of it. So if someone has a very scholarly supported position on, someone like a controversial figure like Henry Ford, we're not going to tell them they shouldn't do it or that we're not going to support it. However, as you would imagine, there are other people in our heritage area that are going to say, why did you let them make this book and let them tell this story? So we have to know what we're getting into when we go down that path. However, what the challenge is that if you get involved in it, especially from the beginning, that you don't know how it's going to end up or if it's going to end up, like you said, Angie. So we don't fund projects that are like just getting started. So if someone says we're going to create a documentary 5 years from now, we may never see it. But if someone says we've created a documentary, it needs to put some finishing touches on it, we'll let you see it, and then possibly we'll get behind it, then we're willing to look at it sort of closer to the tail end than the beginning. But it is an interesting dance that you have to do. Project.
Part of our process too was before we actually fund, once the top selections are made, we go in and we look at the organizations. Well, first of all, they have to say in their grant application, why they should get the grant, and how they, what would lead us to believe that they can carry it out. But we actually do go in and look at their 990s and do an audit, and you know, just check behind and make sure they're who they say they are. And also you have to be in business. I think it's for a minimum of 2 years as a nonprofit before you can apply for a grant from us. A lot of good projects out there, but you've got to be able to manage it.
One thing that none of our presentations talked about was program income. And you need to think of, and I know, you know, Brian actually at Motor Cities, he was one of the resources that I went to when NAHA was starting our grant program 5 years ago. Brian, you're the best. I don't know why you're acting like you're not.
I know,
You've got your
right?
system down. Is Sean on here so I can say that again? You're the best. But anyways,
We're recording it though, Mackensie. We'll play it back.
okay, great. Phew, phew. Anyways, I don't like book projects because even if it's a nonprofit, like a nonprofit partner that I work with all the time, they're ultimately going to want to sell that book. And I don't want to deal with program income for a $5,000 grant. So I see some nods from my co-presenters today, but for those of you who are out there, and just remember that what we've talked about today is not comprehensive. There is more elements when it comes to being, you know, the CFR 200, which Danielle talked about, state law, which Angie touched on, just program income we did not talk about.
Okay, I do have a question, and it's really, Mackensie, I know your grant is limited to X number of partners and that's it. But for Angie and Danielle, is it open? Like, so I know, I think in Angie's case, it's more open, but do they have to be a partner? Can anybody apply? You know, how do you go about figuring out who can apply? I mean, obviously you have lists of like, they have to be a nonprofit or like, you know, they're not for profit, but is that it? Like, is it basically the merit of the project related to your themes or what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, for us, they have to tie a specific their project to our mission themes, and also meeting our mission of preservation, interpretation, or developing for the to help the region and the people of the region through those 5 assets. And so that and there's so many, we've gotten a lot of grants. And let me just say another thing that we didn't mention here. We go out in advance. You know, one of the things was, how do you let people know about your grant cycle? Well, we go out in advance of our grant cycle, and we host, or either we did a Zoom during COVID about our grants program. And we you know, encourage anybody who's interested to come and learn about what it is we offer, to make sure that before they even get started, that they know they've got a good idea that it's going to fit. You know, because we've asked, you know, people think, you know, with us, you know, if heritage, they get heritage and history confused. And heritage and history are 2 different things. And we just don't do history. We do not do battles and stuff like that. That's not what we're about. Okay. And there's a lot of confusion, you know, about that. So it's best if you have a grants program, or you're going to think about starting one, to really educate the public that might be interested in what your very specific guidelines are. And then we have always had our grants manager is available to talk one-on-one and to head someone off before they go too far down a rabbit hole. Because the last thing we want to do is call up a lot of folks and say, I'm sorry you didn't make it because it didn't fit the guidelines.
Right.
You know? So we give every opportunity to try to help them understand that in advance.
Okay, so we're basically at time, but Danielle, could you add to that real quickly?
Yes, very similar to Angie. We have very simple organizational eligibility, nonprofit, either a Baltimore City Department. They have to have good standing in business. They have to be located within the heritage area. That's it. The only thing that they have to convince us in the grant application is the project is that advancing heritage tourism for us. It's more project led versus, because we're trying to cast a wide net of traditional.
Yeah. I gotta go.
It's okay, thanks.
Thank
right.
y'all.
Everybody, this has been a fantastic call, and I'd like to thank our presenters. And honestly, I'm leaning towards having a second call on grants because there was so much information and so much discussion. And Danielle, I might have you come back and finish your presentation.
I am so sorry. I really tried. There was so much I wanted to say. I'm
No,
happy to do that if there's
that's
interest.
Fine. I definitely think there is. So I'm going to thank everybody. I'm going to stop the recording.